ones. If you don't respect those ones, you want to create a gray area. Well, let's not say there's just one faith. Let's just not say there's one baptism. You know, there's a variety of them, and people want to play with the Word of God that way. And if you get a group of people that say, okay, let's change it a little bit, and they all agree to change it, is that unity? What?
Well, in a sense it is because of the group.
Right.
But in the real sense of what the doctrine is presenting is maybe not so much so.
That's right. It's one thing that, we could all agree, but if we don't have God's approval, it doesn't do any good. I mean, the ultimate goal is to please Him, not to please ourselves. And so we need to abide in His teaching. And of course, then you'll have maybe some people there who don't kind of agree with that, but they're making those gray areas. So they have this concept of agreeing to disagree. And that's not true unity. And so he's telling us, or giving us, the recipe for achieving that. And then last week, we covered this 13 through 16, talking about the ways that we achieve that. We being edified, avoid deception, doing your share, having that love. We were just finishing up with that. I'll just read a couple of those verses, and then we'll get you folks, share the reading here. We'll read 17 through 24, which is our next chart, okay? But if you'll notice in verse 14 from last week, that we should no longer be children tossed to and fro, carried about with every wind of doctrine by the trickery of men and the cunning craftiness and deceitful plottings, but speaking the truth in love may grow up in all things into Him who is the head, Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the effective working by which every part does its share, causes growth of the body for the edifying of itself in love. And those were the last 2 points that we were winding down our Bible study last week. But before we move on, one quick question. Since we discussed last week that we should no longer be children tossed to and fro, and mentioned that we don't believe every wind of doctrine and the trickery of men, does that go on today? Are people being tricked? Are people being tossed to and fro? Absolutely. So my question is, why is that so rampant? Why are people being successful and being duped, being tricked? Janet?
They're not grounded in the truth. They don't know God's word.
Okay, that's a key point. Okay, not grounded in. Nikki?
They're willing to be deceived.
They're willing, because if somebody's deceived, whose fault is it? Their own. Okay? You can't stand before God and say, well, He told me a lie. Well, yeah, but you believed the lie. And the reason why we're accountable is because we have access to the source, the truth, to check everything out. Remember 1 John chapter 4, verse 1? Test the spirits to see whether they're of God or not. That's on our shoulders. We always say that for visitors that come in. You better pay attention, look around, see what's going on. And if something's done that you don't know why they do that, you ask them, and are they going to give you a biblical answer for what they're doing? Gene, I saw your hand.
You're not converted to Christ. You don't want to be grounded.
That's it.
And I was thinking of this coming to church this morning. If you're converted to man, if you're converted to the basketball team, if you're converted to this or that, you're not going to be grounded.
No, that is the key. Being converted to Christ, being followers of Christ, we don't want to be converted to the church. The church is just the people. You want to be converted to Christ, and that's going to help us. And that's what he talks about here, because remember last week as we were winding down and talked about that, well, the whole body joined and does it share, everybody, and then having that common love for one another. These are the tools that have been given to us to achieve that true unity, and that's what we're striving for here. That doesn't mean that we're not going to have any problems. How do these things help us with problems? Because problems are going to come. How does this help us? How do these things help us if there's a problem here? Jane?
We're going to try to solve the problems in a way that we're going to cause issue.
That's the key. I mean, the whole point is of trying to maintain the unity. When there's a problem, you deal with it and you move on. That's all. That's all you do. You don't ignore it, and you have that love for one another, and you don't ignore it point number 3, everybody doesn't share. So we look out for one another because it's a genuine care. It's a concern. Why? Because he describes us as a household of God. We are family. We are brothers and sisters. We look out for each other. That's the key to all of this. Now, having said that, let's get into this area. And I don't know why it went on a different line. I moved over a little bit. Let's read chapter 4, 17 through 24. And we haven't started back here in a while. So let's start with Tina. We'll zigzag 2 verses apiece and come forward.
This I say, therefore, and testify in the Lord, that you should no longer walk as the rest of the Gentiles walk, in the fertility of their mind, having them understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the blindness of their heart.
And they, having become callous, have given themselves over to sensuality, for the practice of every kind of impurity with greediness. But you did not learn Christ in this way.
If indeed you have heard him and have been taught by him as the truth is in Jesus, that you put off concerning your former conduct the old man which grows corrupt according to the deceitful lusts.
And EJ, you got verses 23 and 24.
And be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and that you put on the new man, which after God is created in righteousness and true holiness.
All right. Great text. I know we're going to spend the rest of our morning. That greediness should go all the way over to under point number 6. I don't know why I did that on my home computer. Everything lined up. I don't know what happened here. Okay. So the first thing we're noticing, how the ungodly walk. I mean, it's important that we understand that, if we're to walk a certain way, that means you don't walk a certain way. Right? I mean, people have a problem with this idea of pointing the finger at error. How can you stand for the truth without standing against error? Is it possible? Can you stand for the truth without standing against error? Well, you can. Or one is not working. Okay? So obviously, if you're going to take a stand for something, then you're going to take a stand against something. And that's really what he's talking about here. And he's telling them, you don't walk a certain way because of the fact that, remember, who's he writing to? Who's he writing to? Right. Paul is writing to the church at Ephesus. We're reading somebody else's mail. How come we're studying it today? This was written to the church at Ephesus. What's the Church of Christ here on Van Road? What are we doing reading this? Why, Mark?
Christ's doctrine is gospel in both ways, therefore we have the written inspired word.
There's the word.
He called out to, he called us through his gospel.
There it is. This is inspired. When does it ever become uninspired? Right? It will always remain inspired. So this is his message for mankind. And that's why in the book of Colossians, for example, when you're finished reading, you send it over to the church over there and you read the church that I sent to them. Everybody's changing letters because what the church at Ephesus was supposed to do, the church at Philippi was supposed to do, and the church at Colossae was to do what the church at Galatia was supposed to do. Because, and the reason why we can say that, why they're all supposed to do the same thing, reason being, why are all these churches supposed to be doing the same thing? They all have the same head, which is who? Right. So you all have the same head. And this is the inspired message. Remember, Galatians chapter 1, Paul said, I'm speaking by revelation of Jesus Christ. So he's writing by revelation of Christ. And this message is telling them how they are supposed to walk. And so here it is. That you should no longer walk, no longer. You once walked a certain way. You need to change and walk a certain way. Now, there's the list here. A futile mind. What kind of mind is that? What kind of mind is that? That's how the ungodly walk. Any idea what kind of mind that is? Futile. Mark?
Well, if something's futile, it's useless.
Okay. So, describe that kind of person. Characteristics. Anything, Amy?
The idea that life doesn't have a bigger meaning or a bigger purpose or anything past this, so whatever we do right now doesn't actually matter.
Okay, really? I mean, there's not much logic there, right? They're not thinking right. That's the bottom line. I mean, you and I can get in, and you probably have gotten into religious discussions with people, right? If you've gotten a religious discussion where guys are not even close to being on the same level, I mean, they're just thinking it's just way out there. Because there's no standard. If you don't have a standard, the conversation is going nowhere. Dan.
And the first point on the chart and the second one both give you the idea, like you're describing here, that they do have reasoning for things, but it's not valid reasoning. It's not sound.
Right.
It's not consistent based on that point about the standard.
And that's the key. And that's why, this is really good for us because it helps us to understand some of the frustrations that we face and some of the obstacles. I think sometimes we want to give up or throw in the towel and just think, what's the sense? If the gospel's for everybody, why isn't everybody obeying the gospel? If you can know the truth and the truth will set you free, why doesn't everybody see it? And there's another answer, and that is because they don't want to. If you don't mind, is the person that he's refused to consider things. Have you ever studied, and of course we warn about ourselves being this way. Have you ever talked with somebody who has a closed mind? Now, we need to make sure we don't have that. Now, how can you be certain you don't have a closed mind? Why don't you think about it? Because a closed mind does what? What does a closed mind do? Warren, what does a closed mind do?
Well, it can prevent you from understanding the truth.
That's it? Clearly, Nancy?
You don't hear what the king says.
You don't listen. You don't even listen carefully. Jane?
Usually you turn red in the face.
Well, that's almost a person that's being convicted, right?
Well, I mean, if you talk to the person so far and they start showing that,
Yeah.
they're losing it.
So you're not open. And I'll tell you, well, can a person who has a closed mind deal with criticism?
No.
Can they handle a rebuke, correction, instruction? I mean, no. I mean, the whole point is if you close your mind, if you come here today with a closed mind, what are you going to learn today? Nothing. So what do people with closed minds who attend somewhere, why are they going? What are they hoping to hear?
What they want to hear.
What they want to hear, what they already believe, okay? They don't want to be challenged. If I'm wrong, we tell ourselves that, right? If we're wrong, we want to be told, right? Do you believe that? If you're wrong, do you want to be told? Kevin, if you're wrong, do you want to be told? If you're wrong? Yeah. Well, yeah, that should be our attitude. Now, it's not an easy pill to swallow, but we're learning here. This is not the ungodly walk. I don't want to walk that way. I say I'm godly. I say I'm a Christian. I want to do what is right. Well, then don't have your understanding darkened. And I think that kind of relates back to verse 14. Don't be children tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind of doctrine. Why are children so quick to believe a lie, guys? Why are children so quick?
Because they don't know any better.
They don't. They're vulnerable, right? They're
Trusting.
easy prey. What were you saying, Keith?
They're trusting.
Oh, over trusting. And that gets it back to Gene's point. You want to become a man follower? Well, Chuck said, I'm going to heaven. Who cares what Chuck says? Seriously. I can give you stamp approval, but that doesn't prove anything. You want the approval from above. You need to walk by faith, and that's the only way you can please God, Hebrews 11:6. And so, again, we're getting back to this idea of, how we end up with this futile mind or this darkened understanding. And it stems from this idea of just wanting to do what we want to do. And that was point number 6, 5. Well, they all kind of go together here as we go. Let's go back to the text. Don't walk this way as others do. Now, there's, to me, is the danger for all of us here, is the reason why people end up walking that way It's because that's the way the majority do it. You want to fit in, right? You don't want to stand out. You don't want to be different. This is what causes it. You know, the people in this world, they've created their own standard of morality, of what's right and what is wrong. And we've got to guard against that. Having understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God. I think Nikki mentioned that a moment ago. What was that point, Nikki? You were talking about why are children? Oh, yeah. You said because
Because they don't know better.
they don't know any better. Who is the most vulnerable person in any area? You go buy a new car. What does the salesman hope?
That you don't know anything about cars.
You're clueless about cars. I mean, absolutely clueless. And you're very trusting. And he wants you to put your full trust in him. How is he feeling?
Very good.
Oh, man. It's steak tonight. You know, that's what he's wanting. The less you know, and I'm going to tell you, religiously. A lot of religious groups today, a lot of religious leaders, the less you know, that's better off for them, and that's the way they want it. Whereas what do we try to do? We try to educate. We try to, you know, Debbie and I, we got in this class on Tuesday nights, and we're telling the people, look, I just want to give you the information. Now, what you do with that information is totally up to you, but you know, I want to give you the knowledge because knowledge gives you power so you can guard against being led astray. I'm not trying to convert you. I'm not trying to say you have to come where I'm at. I'm saying you need the knowledge. Let's set up a class. Let's study. Let's learn. Give people knowledge. Could you imagine what would you do if you walked into one of these dealerships? No, seriously, Mark, if you walked into a dealership and the dealer says, now listen, there's a lot of things out there. I'd like to sit down and tell you everything about cars and how salesmen work and about the dollars and the cents and the interest and some of the things you really don't need and they try to sneak in. What would your reaction be if a guy told you all that? I want to give you all this information first before you do lunch.
I'd be shocked.
Wouldn't you? Because it's unusual. And that's why we're trying to help people understand that, yeah, we're unusual, we're different. Although this should be the common thing, is giving people the truth, the gospel. Jane?
Our number one goal is go to heaven.
Right.
My number one goal, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, I get my roof on my house.
Okay.
Now, when I start that project, the guy from Lowe's comes out and he gives me this and that and this and that. And I get to looking at that, and I didn't know how to put on a rigid fit, the rigid fit on the house.
Okay.
I didn't know how to talk to him. So what do? I go to Home Depot, I go to Lowe's, and I go in, you know, and I talk to these guys and these people, and I start learning about what a rigid fit is.
Okay.
So that I can talk to, in other words, we educate ourselves on everything except going to heaven. So we have to educate ourselves on going to heaven.
Isn't that something?
How to get there.
I mean, how many of you guys ever planned a trip to Disney? How many hours did you put in on that? No, I'm serious. And you're going to be gone for how long? A week, maybe? Okay. Now, you know, I remember Leah, she actually had a friend, she wanted us to help go with the, I always got to let that caption in there that we went there to look after the children when we went. But she had this person working, I mean, the hours of preparation, and then you've got to go here, and you're going to meet these characters, and you got to get over here, you're going to have this meal, and you get over here, and you get this. I mean, there's just so much time put into this for a week. And how much time and effort are we putting into eternity, preparing for life after death? And, you know, look at all this. These are the very things you guys have been talking about, which makes this lesson so powerful for all of us. Ignorant and blind. All right? That's the very thing that he's been talking about here. These are the things that will destroy us if we don't stay alert and stay on guard. And that's what he's talking about here. Because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the blindness of their heart. Blindness of their heart. Well, how else might you describe that quality? We don't say that too often. Man, that guy's got a blind heart. What might we say? A blind heart. Hard heart. We'll say that sometimes. Callous. I might get back to this idea of being unfeeling, past feeling. I want to talk about in just a few moments. But ignorant and blind. So getting back to what Gene was talking about, have you ever been engaged in a conversation about a subject that you might particularly like to talk about, and the other person is really interested and wants to talk about it, but takes you about 2 seconds to realize they have no idea what they're talking about? You know, it doesn't take long. And I don't want to be like that. That's why I want to be knowledgeable. It's like, Gene, you know, it is frustrating when people start saying things and you haven't got a clue what they're talking about. That puts you at a disadvantage. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the person who wants to come across like they know what they're talking about, and like going, you haven't got a clue what you're talking about. You've never done that. You know, and that's sad. And I don't want us to be like that. And so that's why, you know, so how do you prevent that from happening? Well, like we've been talking about, you have to study. So if he says, don't walk like them, okay, I don't want to walk like them. Well, if you're not going to walk like this, what's going to be required of you? It's easy to say, don't do that. Well, how do you prevent that, Nancy?
You study, you learn.
So what's right? You study, you apply, you grow, you mature, you learn to handle instruction, you get out of your comfort zone. You have to be evolving. I believe in evolution. Yeah, I need to evolve. I need to be changing. I need to be growing. If I'm not going forward, I'm going backwards. And that's a challenge for all of us here, because he's saying this is how the ungodly walk. In our other Bible studies that we've had, isn't it interesting that people who study the less seem to know the most? And why is that? Why is it that you'll get in conversation people who have studied the least come across like they know the most? TJ?
Well, it's not about facts, it's about opinion.
That's it.
Yeah, and I think that you can broaden that to pretty much anything.
Yeah.
You can break it down to politics, you can break it down to sports, you can break it down to whatever. And the least knowledgeable person thinks, well, it's just opinion. So it doesn't matter.
Well, and you know, and in opinions, let's be honest, with some of your opinions can have facts. Okay. What I really want to get into is that which is not opinion. That's really what TJ's talking about. And we need to understand that. There are areas of opinion with us. We have differences of opinion that we live with. Give me one right now. Give me a difference of opinion that we live with. Okay.
Make your bed before you leave the house.
What's that?
Make your bed before you leave the house.
Make your bed before you leave the house. Yeah. Okay. I did that before. Okay, I'm covered. You like brown? Anybody not like brown? We need somebody to not like brown. Anybody? Okay, so doesn't like brown. Okay. That's bad, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter in areas of opinion. Now, what we're talking about now is when we're talking about the doctrinal matters, you know, those facts that are right, you know, when Trey says, you know, Brown is wrong for her, Brown is not wrong for me. Mark?
Well, you got that laid up number 4. Got me thinking. You know, with God, everything from the mouth of God is a fact. There is no opinion, there is no equivocation between the two. It's only when man gets put into the equation that we start vacillating back and forth between the two sides.
That's exactly.
And every time you step over the side to opinion, you've left God.
Isn't that the truth? And getting back with TJ, he made me think of this and what you were talking about, Mark. How many people that you know of religiously or non-religiously, but will engage in a religious conversation without a Bible? How many people do you know will do that? Yeah. Now, how many people will engage in a Bible conversation when you have a Bible in your hand? Gone. That's what TJ's talking about. I'll talk religion as long as you don't have a Bible in your hand. But you got a Bible in your hand, you know what? All of a sudden now I can't preach my opinions. I can't try to bind my opinions. TJ?
And I was trying to make that sports reference, and I think it applies because you have stats. You can look up the fact of the stats of the player.
Right.
But if you and I are just having a conversation without those stats, you can say the player's great, I can say the player's terrible, but until we go pull it up on the internet and go, these are the stats, who's right, who's wrong.
And that's it. The less you know about this, okay, the less, and I see it all the time. To me, it's why we're doing the TV and the radio, trying to educate listeners that, just because a person is on TV or has a radio program or standing in the pulpit, doesn't mean they're the most knowledgeable people. As a matter of fact, I've seen many cases where they're the least. They're the ones, they don't even know what they're talking about, and it drives me crazy. But you know what? As much as that drives me crazy, I'm thinking, you know what? You guys put up with it. You're going to invite somebody who doesn't know anything, and you invite him to preach, and he's going to preach. You're not helping yourself. You only have yourselves to blame. Ignorant and blind. Now look what he goes on to talk. Was there another hand? Gene, you were going to say something.
What you're saying, Romans 1:28.
Read it.
And even as they did not lack to retain God in their knowledge.
That's it.
Just saying that, I'm sitting here reflecting back in earlier years when I was a Baptist. I don't ever hardly remember a preacher using the Bible except for doing this. And as far as taking the Bible and doing what you were doing this morning or we're doing, I don't remember.
And in all fairness, we all know that there are times when they have, okay, in all fairness. But it's not handling it properly. That's the things that we're trying to expose. We're trying to say you need to be consistent. How many times I've heard people read a passage and while they're teaching, and I'm yelling at the TV, read the next verse. Read the next verse. They just stop. Now look what we have here. He goes, who being past feeling have given themselves over. I'll get to that in a moment. Who's past feeling? What is that? What's past feeling?
Like the way we used to feel, the way we used to.
Yeah, but he's talking about but in other words, Trey, the people who are past feeling give themselves over to those things. So what is this past feeling?
Like your years of sin or something?
No, I don't think that.
My translation says callous.
Yeah. When you're past feeling, nothing bothers you. Remember those of Jeremiah's day? What couldn't they do? They couldn't even blush.
They're hardened.
They're hardened.
Yeah, First Timothy 4:2 talks about your mind being callous. You've hardened your heart.
Yeah, he talked about that seared, right? That seared conscience. We know what calluses do, right, guys? They're not so sensitive when you build up those calluses. And that's what can happen. When you are past feeling, and I've seen this, and we've had to deal with it recently, you look somebody right in the eye, and you tell them about what they're doing that's wrong, and they're like, are you done? Seriously. What are they? They're past feeling.
Sometimes when you first start the conversation, because they don't really hear what you're saying. They already hear what they think you're saying, and they're done. And they won't listen anymore because their heart is hardened. They say, I know what you're saying. And they assume certain things. And you may have a really good point to tell somebody, and they don't want to hear it. They're not listening. And their heart is already closed to that. And that's what you started the conversation on. Our minds are closed. Our hearts are hardened. We're seared. We're not going to listen. And so we need to be able to listen, and we want other people to listen too, because God has something to tell us, and we need to listen.
Now, you want to help other people set the tone. Seriously, if you're going into a class or discussion and you want them to be open-minded, you need to come across like you are. And not only just come across like pretending, no, you need to really be open-minded. You're interested in the truth. Being past feeling, it just hurts me that people, that almost describes our recent Wednesday night Bible class of the the Good Samaritan, right? I mean, when you walk past somebody who's been left for dead, how can you be so callous? I mean, how can you not be moved by things?
Chuck, when you're in a discussion, and eventually you've got to go to God's authority. And at that point, when you're looking at God's authority, the open-mindedness stuff kind of gone, because God is the absolute lawgiver. And when he speaks, if we're wise, we're going to listen. And if we're careless, the Bible is full of warnings of what's going to happen to careless people.
Guys, can you quickly think of examples in the Bible, quickly. Think of examples where people were confronted and what kind of emotions were stirred up from hearing the word of God. Give me one. Right? What happens?
Well,
they got angry, didn't they?
They got angry enough to kill.
They got angry. What's another thing when you read in the scriptures of somebody that heard the word of God and they had this reaction?
Pricked in the heart.
Pricked. Okay. Acts 2. Give me another one. How about the sorrow when Simon the sorcerer, when he was rebuked? I mean, it really hurt him. And it kind of relates back to this idea of being pricked. But when you think about the different reactions that people had when they heard the word of truth, and when people, there's, I think of the rich young fool, he went away again. He went away sorrowful. I guess there's a lot of that emotion that's in there. But the problem comes is and guys, I really don't view anger too much as a past feeling. Because sometimes when you rebuke somebody, anger is a first response, and then they settle down, and then that was me when I was in denominationalism. I'm sitting down studying. Automatically, I'm like getting defensive, like, whoa, are you trying to tell me I'm wrong? It's an anger that at least I'm not past feeling. There's more of a chance for somebody who gets a little upset when you have a Bible study with them than a yes person. Do you ever sit down with a yes person? Everything you say, hey, Chuck, I agree with that. It's like I get these correspondence courses back and they're going, yes, true, false, true, false. I'm going, what? Wait a minute, you just over here said it was wrong and now you're saying it's right. Nothing's sinking in here. And when you're past feeling, nothing bothers you. And so you can hear the hardest sermon that you might be guilty of. And I preached in places, 35 years, and I'm sitting there, man, that person's going to make their life right. And they're the first one to come out and say, hey, really enjoyed the lessons there. You're in sin. It's past feeling. Just count.
Like TJ said, you could really be talking about marriage problems right there. What you're basically saying is the same thing happens in marriage problems between two.
Can they become callous? Absolutely. Misty, then Nancy.
When you think of a callus, it's the nerve endings are dead and they no longer feel. I mean, it takes a serious cut or some other laceration to really get through to feel something.
Yeah.
When you're past feeling, I think that's true of the heart too.
Yeah, we should have thrown in there joy. There's gladness of heart on one of the occasions. Nancy?
Well, if people have no conscience.
That's the point. When their conscience isn't bothered anymore, watch out. EJ?
What about revenge? Like John the Baptist lost his head when he talked to the Romans.
You think about, and we're going to be, actually I'm going to be dealing with that in tonight's sermon. We're going to be talking about that. But, that hatred that can be there. Vengeance, obviously wrong. Revenge is wrong. And I'm going to be talking about that tonight in the lesson we're going to be dealing with. Because tonight, we're going to announce it during the Bible, or the sermon this morning. But tonight we're talking about Christianity and Islam. Muslim. Did you just say that? Yes, I did. We're being aired. Okay. Fine. Past feeling, lewdness. See, now these things, now you need to understand. Why do people get caught up in lewdness, uncleanness, greediness, being corrupt and deceitful lust? Past feeling. Past feeling. Okay. What's lewdness? What's lewdness? We got any other versions in their Bibles? Different versions in their Bible? What do you got for lewdness? Lewd behavior. I know you've heard the term before, Mark.
think vulgar.
Vulgar,
Augustine says sexual or sensual.
Immoral.
One says sensuality.
sensuality, exactly. Indecent, yes. Do you know people that behave like that and it doesn't bother them?
You just gotta go to Walmart, girl.
Yes, you do. You can go anywhere, especially, has it been hot this week? Ask Warren. It's been hot this week. And what do you do when it's hot, man? You just naturally do what when it's hot? Take everything off. That's what you do. That's totally acceptable. You know, it's funny, you know, if the doorbell rings and, you know, the mom goes, answer the door, I'm not dressed, I'm in my underwear. But yet people will go outside and it's painted a different color, but it's still the same thing. And it doesn't bother them. What's going on here?
Funny story. I gotta tell one on Kelsey. She was about 3, 4 years old. We go to the Y and we work, you know, go to the Y and swim for exercise. So she goes up to this grown lady and daughter that are wearing bikinis, and she goes, why are you wearing your panties and bra to swim in? She goes, you need more clothes. And then she comes walking over to me, which everything she said was right, but.
Well, and again, since this isn't a sermon on that and, you know, in dress, but obviously when when you're in place, when you've got ladies separated from the guys, you know, and you know, that's a different discussion. But you're right. That's you know, kids pick up on that. Because I told the story of my granddaughter, right? When Leah bought modest swimwear and they were drying and they were still wet, and so Leah said, you know, why don't you wear these? She's like, what, 2 or 3? You know, wear your old swimwear. And she started crying, saying, God doesn't want me wearing my panties outside. Here's a 3-year-old crying because he realizes I shouldn't be able to touch with public like that. And so, again, when you're past the feeling, you cannot convince anybody. I'm telling you. I told Deb this. I said, I can't do it, but I'd love to send it out to every Christian all over the world. Well, that'd be a lot of Christians. But just to ask this question. What is your definition of a modest apparel?
You get all those answers.
Well, and what people need to understand is nudity is not a modest apparel. It's not, because there's no apparel. Okay? A modest apparel. You know, and that's where lewdness comes in here. And that people need to give it some thought. It doesn't matter if you don't think about it. It doesn't matter if you're just hot and I wasn't trying to, you know, attract attention. You know, this is the way the Bible describes it. Go ahead.
Well, and I think lewdness is more than just being immodest or whatever. It's also like those crass jokes. You know, you have all these new comedy movies that are coming out, and people are like, oh, don't you want to go see it? And I'm like, no, there is no appeal to all these jokes that are supposed to be funny when they're pushing the boundaries to see how far they can get away with all these, like, you know, it doesn't have to be with how little clothing they wear. It's the language that they use.
The innuendos.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Lewdness covers so much more than
100%.
just the immodesty.
And that's the society that we live in. We have to be aware of that. And so we say, you know, that's how the ungodly walk, by the way. Well, I do all of them but one. Or I don't do all but one. Let's put it that way. Can't justify it, folks, because we are to be different in this world. Uncleanness kind of relates to that idea with the corruptness, but with greediness. And when I think of greediness, what is that? Really, what is greediness?
Selfishness.
And that's all it is. When I think about the Christian, I think of the word selflessness, not selfishness. And if it's all about, well, I'm going to do whatever I want to do, and I don't care what the Bible says. Now, I care what the Bible says about this, this, and this, and this. But when it comes to this, I don't care what the Bible has said. Well, guess what? If you're lying, your understanding is darkened, ignorant in mind, and your past feeling. I don't care. And I had a guy tell me that in a Bible study. We're just going through the plan of salvation. And he just says, If water has anything to do with salvation, I don't want any part of it. But he claims to be a Christian, wants to go to heaven, loves the Word of God. You don't want anything? You just read it. There's water, what hinders me from being baptized? You know, there's just so many verses on this. But you can get past feeling in certain areas. So I want you to understand there's the danger for us. You could be past feeling in a certain aspect of your life. You're a good person, but you happen to beat your wife. None of us know it, but you do it. You're past feeling there. But on the outward, everything else you do is great. You got to be careful. It's every facet of our life that he's talking about here. And I don't want to be past feeling in any area of my life. That's the danger. And obviously, you're going to be growing corrupt. That's how the ungodly walk. The deceitful lusts that are out there, it all relates to the very same thing. And so, guys, what I want you to be doing this week is read the rest of this chapter, because we're going to be talking about some things there showing that, well, I don't do this because I do this. And that's the next part of our chapter that we're going to look at. And so I appreciate your comments. Our time is gone. So thank you. And we'll take a few minutes to get ready for worship.
Right.